All right, so welcome to this session. So today we're going to look at prompt engineering for professions. So it could be in the NGO space, it could be in the private space. This is what we're going to look at today. So what we'll learn today basically is around prompt engineering and why it matters. Then also look at the anatomy of a perfect prompt. And then also look at the 10 key essential prompt techniques that you want to adopt. Then also look at prompting for M&E and research work. Then we'll also have a look at the before and after the prompt makeovers. Then we'll have a look at the common mistakes and also how to address some of those mistakes as you're doing your prompt engineering. Then the last one, we'll look at building your personal prompt library. Okay, so what is prompt engineering? So this is basically just a skill that separates an average AI user from a powerful user. So what AI is doing is based on what you're feeding AI into. So AI is only as good as the person using AI. I keep emphasizing this. So the better the prompt, the better the output. So this is what we'll look at. Okay, now just a brief description of what prompt engineering is all about. So when we talk about prompt engineering, it's basically just you designing and refining the instructions that you give your AI model, right? So that you get the correct, accurate, and useful, and even just quality outputs consistently that can even help you do the task that you're planning of doing. Now, just a quick pointer that I just want to make mention here is that when you are having a better prompt, right, you're going to get 10 times better output. That is when you use a well-crafted prompt, right, compared when you use a vague prompt. So, and the other thing that you also take note of is that the same AI, like the same AI model that you're using, your prompt is only variable that changes the results, right? It's the same AI. You can use Claude, you can use ChatGPT, you can use Gemini, but the prompt is what will determine the output of that task that you're working on, right? Then, you can use this prompt is very applicable to any field. You can be in research, you can be in coding, you can be somebody that is in the strategy field or in the M&E field. Prompt engineering is something that is applicable as long as you're using AI for your tasks, for your routine task. It's something that you have to learn, and we'll be able to share more details of what prompt engineering is all about, right? So we have the anatomy of a perfect prompt. Okay, so this is a framework that I usually use when I'm doing a task and I'm using AI model to help me just generate better prompt, right? It has 5 elements that I'll break down with you, right? So with our framework, I don't know how to pronounce it, but the R stands for raw. Here you tell AI what or who to be, right? So depending on your task, depending on the task that you have. For example, you can tell AI, if you're an M&D specialist, you can tell AI you are a senior M&D specialist, right? Then you give context to what you want, right? So you give a relevant background basically to what information that you want. For example, you are working as a USAID, you are an M&D specialist working on a USAID climate project in Zambia. You give that context, right? Then you give it a task now. You've given it a role and then you've given it a task, a context, sorry. Then the next step, you give it a task. So with a task, basically you're just stating exactly what you need, right? What do you need out of this AI model, right? So let's say, for example, you want to develop output indicators. You write there, develop 5 smart output indicators, right? And then it gives you give it a task. Then the output now, you want to specify how your results should come out, how AI should give you the feedback, right? So you give it a task. So now you want these indicators, right? So you give it an output. Say, okay, look, I want the format to be in a table format with the indicators in the row, and then on the other side you have the means of verification, and each indicator should have the means of verification in a table format, right? That is what you do. Then the other thing, the last part of this framework is the filter. Here you can add constraint or you can use a tone, right? You say, okay, use a simple language, or maybe use a language that is suitable for donors, use a language that is suitable for community providers. So you give it a tone so that whatever output that is going to come out, it's in the language or the tone that you have given it, right? So this is a framework that you need to use when you want to get the most out of AI. It's a very powerful framework that you can adopt in your work as a profession. So it's something that you would want to use as you do your, AI integration in your field. Okay, now let's give an example of how a full assembled prompt looks like based on our framework that we have. Now, on the left side, we have a weak prompt, right? Somebody just goes into ChatGPT and tells ChatGPT to say, look, write me some of M&E indicators for my project. Now, this is too vague and it's too weak. AI will give you what you want. It give you what you ask. It do not question to say this is too what. It will give you whatever you've asked to give you, right? Because it's a generative tool, so it's going to generate content based on the request that you've given it, right? Then here we have a strong prompt, which has used our framework that we just went through, right? So here you're going to assign, this is how your prompt is going to look like. So for example, we'll give an example. You assign it a role as an M&D specialist, right? You've given it a role. Then you give it the context. Say, I'm managing a USAID adaptation project in Zambia targeting 5,000 farmers. You've given it the context, right? And then now you give it a task to say, develop 5 smart outcome indicators for the resilience component. You've given it a task. And then you give it an output. How do you want the results to come out, right? You say, look, I want this to be presented in a table format. The indicators, the means of verification, and the frequency, and also even the data source. You can even include that, right? And then the last part now, you filter to say, okay, I want it to be in a simple, clear language that is donor friendly, right? So that's how your prompt. So when you run these 2 prompts, you get 2 different results, right? So what you can do is you can do this first and see the results, and do the second prompt and see the results. You'll see that you're going to get 2 different results, and you appreciate that the fact that the strong prompt here is going to give you more insights, and you'll be able now to adapt and refine the output that ChatGPT or Claude has given you. So this is how you would want to use this framework in action, right? And yeah, so a prompt is not really a search query. You're not searching for something when you go on ChatGPT. You want to get output. You want to get results. When you go on Claude or Gemini, you want to get results. You don't want to search. Search is for Google. But if you use AI, you don't search for AI. It's not a search query. So the better the prompt, the better the results. So the more you give it context, the better the output of your results. Now, so here we'll look at some of the 10 essential techniques that you want to adopt. You must adopt these, because they will help you to play around AI and also make your work a bit easy as you're using AI, right? So we have the techniques, that's foundation skills. So the first 4 will focus mainly on the foundation skills. So like I mentioned in our framework, we have the role. This is a very important technique that you must assign as you're doing your prompt, right? You must assign a specific context, like have that persona, give ChatGPT a persona so that they can speak in those lines. So for example, you can say you are an experienced impact evaluator specializing in gender sensitivity program. You've given it a role, you've given it a persona. So even the output is gonna speak like that of a specialist in the gender sensitive program, right? Then the second example, the second technique that you would want to use are the few shorts example. So with the few shorts example, I'll do another session around some of these generative, some of these prompt engineering techniques. But for the purpose of this, I'll not go into detail. So with the few shorts examples here, what you're looking at, you want AI, you show AI an example of what you want, right? So like our previous example where we wanted indicators. So what I can do is I can generate some of those indicators, right? And then paste them into ChatGPT or into Claude. I paste them and say, now do the same for my project. Or maybe I see another project that is doing a similar task or a similar work that I'm also doing. I can get those ideas from that project, and then I paste them onto my model. And then I ask it to say, look, this is what I'm doing, and this is what I want you to do based on some of these outputs that I've put. Okay, so this is how ChatGPT will be able to give you those outputs. So that's what we call, when you say few short examples. So you give it some hint to say, okay, I want something like this, and then it now break down that. Then the third principle that, or the third technique that you'd want to adopt is a chain of thought. So here you're asking AI to reason step by step. So you're asking AI to give you more, like, for example, this is very good experiment if you are doing you want to come up with a guide of some sort, maybe a data collection guide. You would want to use the chain of thought. So you want it to think through this step by step before giving you the final answer. So an example that I can give is you want it to, an example that I can give, for example, you're working on a project like the one that we've mentioned, the climate smart project, right? And then you ask AI to reason step by step. So it's going to give you the output step by step until it gives you the final result that you want to use for whatever in project that you're doing, right? So in the case we're looking at the indicators, so you would ask it now to say, okay, can you break down these indicators step by step? I want 5 output indicators step by step. So you're going to give you the first one, and then if you're okay with the first one, you tell it to give you the next one, and then if you're okay with the next one, and then it gives you the next one until you come up with all the 5 indicators. And then at the end, now you can tell it now to compile these into a table format, because you had those step by step processes, indicator by indicator, before now you came into the final output. So that is what the chain of thought is all about. So I'll go into more detail on these techniques in the next session, that once we meet, we'll be able to discuss more into detail and give you proper examples. But for the purpose of this, it's a high level summary, and I don't want to go much into detail to this. Then the fourth one is the output formatting. Like I mentioned in the previous one, where we give it what is it that we want the format to be, right? So you specify the structure of the output. If you want it to be in paragraphs, you want it to be in bullets, you want it to be in markdown, so you specify that in your prompt, so that whatever output that comes, it comes in the format that you want, so that it's easy for you to just move it from one document, from this to another document, based on the need of based on what you are working on, right? Then the technique 5 to 7, we're talking about refinement and control, right? So here, the first, number 7, is the constraint setting. So here it's more like the filter. In our framework, we talked about filter, but here in this technique, we're talking about constraint setting. So here you put a limit, because sometimes ChatGPT or Claude can give you so much information. So what you want to do is you limit. To say, okay, can you do this within 100 words? Can you do this within 3, 4, 5 sentences, right? So you want to put that constraint. You can also put a tone. I want this to sound donor friendly. I want this to sound community friendly. So you put that tone, right? Then we have another step, which is the iterative prompting. So with iterative prompting, what you're doing, or what you're interested in, is you treat it more like it's a conversation, right? You have, like, when you open your chat, you can have that iterative prompting, where you've given it a prompt and it's giving you the output, and then you tell it, okay, now this is good. Now you build up from the previous conversation. So okay, now make the recommendations more specific and add one example for each, and then it gives you that. And if you feel like you're not satisfied, you can always tell it, okay, instead of you giving me 5 recommendations, can you give me the best 3 recommendations and also provide each with an example, right? Then you need to do that. If it gives you something that you're not okay with that, so you keep on having those like it becomes like a chat where you're refining the conversation based on the previous chat, right? So this is also something that you would want to use as you're doing your prompting and as you're using your AI. Then we have the negative prompting. So you tell AI what not to do. So you want to maybe write a policy brief, or you want to write a presentation for a certain particular community or a certain particular group. right? So you tell AI, say, look, don't use this type of language, don't use jargons, don't, don't put this in bullet points, don't do that, don't exceed this number of words. So you're telling it what not to do. Then AI, ChatGPT, the Claude, whatever model that you're using, it's going to do exactly what you've told it not to do, right? So it will not do those things that you've told it not to do. It will produce the output based on the guidance that you've given it, right? So that is what we call the negative prompting. Then we have the advanced power moves. So these are like one of my favorite. So the first one is where you upload a document and then you do your prompt. So even with this term, you can also use that framework that we discussed earlier. You upload your document, you attach the file, and then ask those precise questions, right? So for example, this works well if you're using Notebook, Google Notebook, where you upload all these documents that you have, and then you ask it questions based on what you've uploaded, right? So an example here, maybe you have a project description and you want to come up with an M&D framework, or you want to come up with a theory of change, just something around your project, right? You can get those that project description, upload it, and then ask it to say, look, you are a specialist in ABCD. I want you to do this and this based on this document that I've shared. Then AI will be able now to read through the document and generate what you have asked it to do. And if you're not satisfied, you do that conversation again. Give it whatever you want, give it the tone, give it the constraint, give it the persona. So all those things can be done in this technique. Then the other one is the persona switching. You ask AI to argue multiple perspectives, right? So here you can do a persona switch, okay? So the first response as a skeptical donor asking hard questions, then the second as a project team defending their results. So you can have those type of persona switching type of prompting where maybe you've done a data collection and you're an M&D specialist and also you are supervising some data collectors. You can have that conversation so that it switches personas. So, okay, look, you are an M&D specialist. This is the data. I found some of these queries in the data. How best can these be addressed? Then you also assign the same prompt, but now with a switch in persona to a data collector. So these are the gaps that we found. How best can those be adapted as a data collector? So you want to get both sides of feedbacks. So that's also another way to use the persona switching. Then you have the template prompting. So with this one, you provide a template and ask AI to fill it. So what you do is you have an Excel table, or you have, let's say for example, you want to develop a log frame, right? You want to develop a log frame, or you want to develop a tool. So what you do is you get that table, upload it or paste it on your model. Then you ask it to say, look, I have this table, I have these rows and columns with all these titles and headers. Can you fill this table based on this project description and make it user friendly? Whatever you add in the prompt, then it's going to give you what you've asked for. So you generate that in a table format based on how you pasted it now with information filled in those columns. So those are some of the techniques that you can take note of as you are doing your as you are interacting, as you're also leveraging AI in your line of work. Now, so for the purpose of this session, we'll speak to research and M&E. So you may be a program officer, project manager, but your line of work involves research. Your line of work involves M&E. So this is something that you can also take note of, right? Now, some of the just examples of ready-to-use prompt templates for you guys that are in the M&E space. Let's say, for example, indicator development. That's a task that you want to do. And it's a routine task, basically, because you'll be doing these things over and over. So some of these things AI can be able to help you support and reduce time so that you focus on major issues and like routine tasks, right? So for example, you want to develop an indicator. Here's a prompt that you can use, right? You're an M&D specialist for a sector, maybe agriculture or health in Zambia, or in whatever country that you're looking at, targeting adolescents, depending on the population that you need. Develop 5 level, you can either output or outcome indicators, and then for each, write the indicator. You can even add the indicator definition, the unit of measurement, the baseline approach, the means of verification, then present this in a table format. So AI is going to give you those outputs, but your role now as an M&E is to verify whether these indicators, are they smart enough, right? You also need to ensure that, are they realistic? Are they not too ambitious? So that is your role now, because what AI is giving you is just the first draft. The final draft is what you're going to review, clarify, and also write better. Then let's say, for example, you're writing an evaluation report, right? And you want an executive summary. You give it a role. You're an evaluation specialist writing for a donor audience. Summarize the following findings in 500 words. Highlight key 3 achievements, 3 challenges, and 3 actionable recommendations. You give it a tone. Be professional. Plain language. Then you also paste the findings in your model so that it helps you to read through those findings that you found. Then you want to do a theory of change review for your project, right? You review this theory of change and identify, for example, 1, are there any logic gaps in the causal chain, assumptions that may not hold, and then any missing pathways to impact. Then suggest 2 improvements. So you're going to paste your theory of change, and then AI will be able now to review those, your theory of change, right? So that's how you would want to leverage AI in your M&E, because these are routine tasks, okay? Your duty now should focus on answering the questions that your data is providing you with. If you know that, okay, our community, depending on the project, right, they are not performing well. That is what your role as an M&E should focus on, not trying to do routine things that AI can be able to work on. So that is something that you would want to take note of. Okay, now we have these ready-to-use prompt templates. If you're in the research work, we have what we call something that you can use for literature synthesis. So, for example, you give it a role. You always give it a role, give it a persona so that it gives you the best output possible. It's not always, but it's recommended. So you're a research analyst. This is a prompt that you can use, right? You're a research analyst. I'll share 3 research reports. Then across all these 3, identify the common themes, any contradictions, any gaps, and then strong evidence, right? Which one has the strong evidence, right? And then present these in a matrix with 3 columns, the themes and rows. Then you upload those 3 documents that you said you upload. Then AI, within a few minutes, it will be able to do that comparison matrix. Now, what this will save you, to save you time for you to go through one report and look at the themes, look at the gaps. Then you move to another report when you can just do all that using just a simple prompt, and your duty now is just to verify whether the output, do they make sense or not. So that is something that you have to take note of. Then we have the methodological section draft. You are writing a research and you want it to help you with your methodology. It's straightforward. You just do your prompt. Say, look, you're a research analyst or you're a research specialist. Help me write a mixed method methodology section for a study on climate change impact on health. You give context, maybe in the community of Lusaka or Zambia. Then you include your research design. So you tell it to say, look, can you include the research design, the sampling strategy, the data collection tools, the analysis approach, even the ethical consideration. You tell it to say, use academic writing style, use academic language. So that is what you tell it, and you'll be able to do that, right? Then let's say, for example, you're a researcher and you want to do a key informant interview guide. You want to develop a key informant interview guide. These are routine things. Okay, these are routine things. These are things that AI should be able to help us. Don't feel bad or don't feel that you are using, no. It's just here to help you work faster. So that is the first thing that you want to look at. So when you want to develop a key informant interview guide, this is a prompt that you can use, right? So now, as a research specialist, develop a semi-structured key informant guide for interviewing maybe a participant type, for example, maybe a key stakeholder, right, about a topic maybe on teenage pregnancy, right? Then you tell it, say, look, can you include 8 to 10 open-ended questions, 2 to 3 probing questions per section, and then an introduction script. Then organize these by theme. So this is what it's going to do. Imagine without AI, you'll be able to spend more time trying to develop that tool when you can just do it with AI. So this is something that we have to leverage and take advantage of. Okay, now we are coming towards the end of the session, but let's dive into the before and after prompt so that you just see the difference, that your output is dependent on your prompt. Whatever you put in there will determine the results. Okay, so let's say, for example, you're writing an evaluation summary. So before you say summarize this evaluation, okay? And then the possible AI output will be generic 3-paragraph summary with no structure, no rating, repeated content from the report, and usable without complete rewriting, right? Then after you do the right prompt, you give it, say, which is where you are assigning the role, you give it context, and then you also put in the persona and the likes. So the AI output that will come out will be something that is structured, with rating, 3 bullet achievements, maybe 2 risks, and also 3 numbered forward recommendations, ready to submit with minor edits, right? So that is how you'd want to do. Then let's say, for example, another makeover tool here is where you want to develop a survey, right? Let's say you want to develop a survey. So basically, if you want to develop a survey, before a good prompt, you say create a survey for my food security project. It's going to give you 10 generic mixing topic randomly, no structure, there's even no scale, but after you do a prompt, a better prompt where you do a better prompt where you even tell it to say, look, as a research or as an M&E specialist, can you create 15 household questions for food security baseline in rural Zambia, right? Respondents are female-headed households. Include sections on dietary diversity, income, coping strategies, access to markets, and use the 5-point Likert scale where appropriate, right? Then keep this language in a simple for easier translation, right? So what the output will be, 15 structured questions, 4 clearly labeled sections with the correct scale, the context appropriate to Zambia, right? So this is how a good prompt looks like, right? And this is how output using a good prompt will look like compared to output using a bad prompt. Okay, now we move towards the end. We look at the common mistakes and also how to fix some of these common mistakes. So most of the professionals get them wrong, but there's a fix to all these issues. Now, these are the common prompt mistakes and also how to fix them. So the first one, your prompt is too vague and there's no context. How do you fix that? You can add the role, the sector, the country, or even the population. Just give it some context, right? Then one giant request. Let's say, for example, you want to develop an M&D plan, right? You just enter that into prompt and then it generates that. An M&D plan is a big document, right? It's got like 15, 20 page. So what you want to do is you break them down. Per section, you ask it to do that. Per section, you do it per section. So, okay, this is the data collection section. I want you to do this. This is the data quality section. I want you to do this. This is the M&D framework section. I want you to do this. So you just break each, into steps, and then one task per prompt, right? So if you want to work on the data collection section, one prompt, one task, one prompt, right? Then accepting first output blindly. So AI will give you the first output and then you accept it blindly. So the best way is to reiterate. You just give it another prompt, maybe to improve it better or maybe to write it better, so that it comes out well. Okay. Then the other one is not rereading the prompt yourself. You write a prompt, you enter it directly into ChatGPT, and then you don't reread that prompt. So that's also a mistake, because you can end up writing a wrong prompt, that will give you the wrong output, right? So the best way is to read it loud. If it's confusing you, then it's confusing. So you need to fix it. Okay. The other one is no output format. You write a prompt, you don't tell it the output of how you want it to come out. It's going to give you whatever it's able to give you on its best capacity. So the best way is you tell it. If you want it to be in bullet form, you want it to be in Word, you want it to be in JSON, you want it to be in a table format, you tell it and it will be able to give you what you're looking for, right? Then the other one is not giving examples, depending on the task. But if you have an example that you want AI to look at and use, I would prefer you use that. Okay? You paste one example of what you want. Right? If you're maybe doing a CV writing, you can paste your experience and then you just tell it to say, look, can you tailor my CV or tailor my experience to this role, right? Then it will be able to generate that and make it better. Then forgetting the audience. Who are you writing it for, right? Who is it that you're targeting with this task that you're doing? So always ensure that you add that filter at the end to say, look, this should be in a plain language. I'm targeting the donors or I'm targeting the community. So this is something that you have to take note of as you do your AI integrations. Okay, now build your persona prompt library. So whatever prompt that has worked, there's always a way that you need to save that, so that because you may end up doing the similar task maybe a few months from now. So if you found your formula that this prompt is giving you the best output, I would advise you to save it. Okay, you need to build that and maintain your library. So save what works. When a prompt gives you a great output, you copy it in a doc, in a Google, in a Word document, you paste it there. Then you can also use placeholders, replace the specifics with brackets, right? Maybe the prompt that you were looking for was focusing on high HIV infection, and you wanted to develop maybe a guide or a survey on why there's high HIV infection. So when you're saving your prompt, you would want to get rid of some of those specifics so that your next task may not be in the same line. So it will be easier for you to just replace those based on those brackets that you've put. So you say, okay, here you had mentioned Zambia, but the next task maybe may require you to do something for Malawi. So you'd want to just put in brackets, country, the sector, and audience. So this is how you'd want to save your prompt. Then the other thing that you also want to do is you can also just organize these tasks, organize by task. You can even create folders. Okay, in this folder, I have prompts for indicator development. In this folder, I have prompt for report writing. In this folder, I have prompt for surveys. In this folder, I have prompt for literature review. And then the last one for proposal writing. So this is something that you want to ensure you have as you maintain your library. Okay. Then the other thing that you may also want to do is maybe you had made some changes in your prompt. You'd want to have those versions. You keep version 1, version 2, so that you know where you had made some changes and why it improved, right? Then if also you're working with a team that is in the same field as you, you may also want to just share these with the team so that they're able to understand and also just learn from, unlike them doing the same prompt over and over, so that you get the best output. The same project, the same team, so meaning you can share some of these as a team, right? Just a clean sheet, I would say it's a cheat sheet for prompt engineering, right? Print and keep. So the first, we talked about the form, I don't know how to pronounce it, right? But this framework, the RCT4 framework, right? We talked about assigning the role. We talked about the context, give it the background info, right? You tell it, we talked about the task, what to do, the output, what is needed, and also the filter, which is the constraint and the tone. Then we talked about the 10 techniques, the 10 key techniques. You assign the role, you use few short examples, you use the chain of thought where you're breaking it down step by step. You also have the output formatting. Then you have the constraint, right? Then the iterative prompting, the negative setting. Then you have the more advanced one where you upload a document and then you add the prompt. Then you have the persona switching where you want to get 2-point view reference. Okay, then you have the template prompting where you have a table and you want it to feed that information for you. So you can use that. Then avoid these things, too vague, you have a prompt that is too vague, there's no format that has been specified, then it's just one giant request and you want it to give you that. Then also no examples given, you accepting the first result or the first output first minus you probing. So that's something that you need to avoid. Then no audience. You've done a prompt, but there's no audience, right? Depending on the task, sometimes if it requires to go out, you need also to have an audience. Then the other thing is never, you don't, some of these things you need to avoid is where you don't reiterate. It gives you output. You can still further ask, just to have, confidence in the output. You can always ask it to do it better, do it this way, do it that way, so that you have that clean format. Yeah. So, like I said, AI is only as good as the person using it, right? The good prompt will give you the better result. So the specificity of your prompt determines the quality of your output. It's garbage in, garbage out. There's no two ways about it. Okay. That's some of the key takeaways that you need to start using today. You need to use this framework. You need to use this framework that I've discussed. You start with simple prompt, then iterate. The first output is a draft, not the final answer, right? Then you specify the format. Always tell AI you want a table, you want a bullet list, and also you just specify so that it gives you the best output. Then the other thing that you also want to do is you build a personal prompt library. You save the best prompts with placeholders for easy reuse. That's also another aspect that you want to use. Then you also have, like I said, is that AI is not really trying to replace anybody's knowledge or make somebody look like they are lazy, they don't want to think. No, AI is just here to amplify your expertise. You know these things, but AI will make you know these things more better. So those are some of the things that you want to talk about. Okay, so thank you. And if you have any questions, you can always ask and I'll be able to respond to those questions.